All right, guys. Podcast number 2. We're here to talk about kind of the three of us, our vision for this thing that we're trying to create. There's a little bit of a foundation that we're coming in over the back of something that Zach and Travis put together for us, and now we're all kind of wanting to build something together.
Montana Wild 2.0, baby.
Yeah. We've got a cool. There's some backstory, but I think we have some pretty big visions for what we want to do together, and that'd be interesting to hear or see where we're going. I know we're talking. There's a lot of big plans for the future. In the short term, the podcast is an easy one for us to kind of get going, get our feet under us, kind of let people know that we're back. But what else, Ryan? What all do we have going?
Well, I think it's interesting, like where the industry's been. Like when I first got into the industry way back when, I think I started. Let's see, on the hunting and outdoor side, I've been in it for about 25 years, but in Bozeman, I've been since about 2008, and I think that's really before even hunting media was even a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I felt like. There was a few people that were doing it, but it was really like old school, older guys, kind of just like carrying around a camera by themselves, or maybe a buddy came out with them, but they're usually in that like 55 to 65 age bracket of like kind of making these hunting films. And they were really good, obviously. And that's what got, inspired maybe the next generation of what media could be. And as I kind of cut my teeth in marketing, obviously coming out of college, this whole idea, this whole concept of hunting media was even, it was obviously new to me because I wasn't even a hunter at that point. And then as I started to kind of build what is Mystery Ranch over all those years, obviously a lot of people were involved in that, but Montana Wild at that point was pretty new.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, and when we first met, I remember when Jason Matzinger came in the front door, and even Randy Newberg was kind of a new concept. Like, there's tons of different people that were doing a media, but then there was like these two young kids that, these kind of, in my world, they came out of left field, and they were producing good media, and I can't remember how we even met, Zach. Or
I don't remember either off the top of my head.
Yeah, we're getting old, right? So yeah, like I feel like hunting media in general at that point was coming about, and it was new and it was fresh, and people were trying new things. I think the outdoor industry that I was a part of was obviously way ahead of the hunting market as far as storytelling with films. I remember, even some of the films that were being shot, and the first films that I was working on, a drone was pretty new to the whole idea.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, but not to date ourselves too far back, but I feel like Montana Wild was really helping kind of push the industry forward at that point, as far as what hunting media represented. And so pretty cool to kind of be sitting in this garage, and Zach's garage, and hanging out, talking about what could be Montana Wild 2.0. And what we could, kind of recreate the vision and kind of build upon what Zach and Travis have already done. So, yeah, I'm just excited to talk about that a little bit.
For sure. Yeah, and for everyone that knows Montana Wild, then you kind of have an idea of what it is. But for people that somehow will land here and listen to this, Montana Wild, we basically just made hunting and fishing films. But we're here in Bozeman, Montana. I have Ryan Holm over here on my left, Jared Miller on my right, and we'll kind of get into everyone so that you can kind of understand who's talking and how all this flows. But I think we wanted to start by touching on maybe some very generalized concepts of what we might be trying to achieve. And I think the cool part about like this conversation and a lot of the conversations is like we're figuring it out right now. We don't really know. And so hopefully the podcast will be a cool insight into some of the things like as they develop. But, I just in the last 6 months, basically went back to working for myself and just being in the industry for a long time, like Ryan. I don't know. I've always been like kind of a go-getter in life and just very passionate about what I do. And I think there's an opportunity to do things your own way and for yourself and do it well and create content and hopefully products for people that brings a lot of value to people that share the same pursuits as us. That's like definitely way scarier than going and getting a job for someone. But I think there's just there's a lot of things that you can get excited about with what I think we can do with Montana Wild, which is very different from, not that you're not excited working for other people, but I think like the possibilities and the like unlimited, like the blank slate to be like, what should we do? Whatever we want to do, as long as it like checks a few boxes and isn't totally stupid, like we can do it, and like that's pretty cool as far as this whole thing.
Yeah, it'd be interesting for you to cover kind of your transition, because you kind of went through working for yourself and then working for Stone Glacier, doing a lot of media development. And now you're kind of transitioning back to working for yourself. But there was probably a lot that you had learned at Stone Glacier through that period of time, like working with people, working with ambassadors, working on films, on budgets, and all that stuff that comes a part of it. You're also doing a lot of product testing and all of those things. Like maybe expand on that a little bit, that experience that you got from just that in general.
Yeah. So the cool part about Stone Glacier, I live with Pete Munich, who was I think he was the first employee with Kurt. But he worked at Stone Glacier. We went on a cat hunt, shot some photos. Lyle ended up buying a couple images. And I'd known Lyle before the SG days, but wouldn't say that we stayed in touch or anything. So that was kind of how I kind of got my foot in the door over there. And I knew Andrew Whitney as well. And we'd spent time hunting and kind of shooting bows and doing some stuff. So I had a couple points of contact there. But the coolest part about Stone Glacier was like, I basically got to do everything I'd been doing for Montana Wild and like branding and building a brand and building content. And then just instead of being a independent contractor and just handing off a project and hoping they executed and utilized it well, now I was the guy that just got to be inside the brand and use I got to develop the content. I got to shoot the content. I got to be in the content. I got to test and work on the product with Kurt and give feedback and understand it, and then take all the content and leverage it towards the brand. And obviously Lyle Hebel, the marketing director, it was him and I, basically a 2-man team for the first 3 of my 4 years there. And like, he's awesome. But it was just us. And so it was really cool to like see it from like the very infancy of an idea to full execution of branding Stone Glacier and selling products and creating a culture and an idea and a concept of like what Stone Glacier was, and like continuing to like build momentum.
Yeah, no,
project after project and hunts and, over time versus just handing something off and being like, do cool things with it, guys. Like,
yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think it was pretty funny. When I stopped by, I did a tour of Stone Glacier because I had never been there because, obviously I was Mystery Ranch. I was the enemy for a long period of time. And I got to go there and hang out and walk around with Lyle and see the Stone Glacier facility. And then we walked into this one room that had like double doors, I think, or maybe it was a single door. And he was like, "Oh, you'll know this guy that's in here," and opened the door, and the whole room's pitch black. And there's Zach just plugging away at his computer with his photo studio behind him, and he's just like working on editing a video in the complete darkness. And so, I imagine you had a lot of those days. So
yeah, there was a lot of days where Lyle and I, we called it the art department, but yeah, I mean, when you're editing films, you kind of have to hide out. Like when we went to the new building, like my office is the cave, like it was just like a back hole, like in the upstairs where like you could just get away and be in a dark room.
Yeah.
But yeah, you spend a lot of time editing video when you're kind of in that startup phase and you don't have a lot of resources to truly like just produce.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of been a one-man band in a lot of ways when it comes to content for a long time. I mean, we worked with some great individuals who built projects and all that. But for the most of my career, I've been very heavily involved in all the content that I've produced. Maybe not full hands-on of doing everything, but there's a lot of projects that I took from like base level to like finished product. Which has given me a lot of really good experience, but it also bogs down your time and your ability to do certain quantities and qualities of work, which is hopefully the cool part about what we do, is just working with like-minded people and trying to find ways to like bring people into the fold and not just have Zack be like making videos.
And the bigger picture of what you've done really, and Ryan as well, is you guys built brands for other people. You like all that work that you did. Even, well, I guess you had the Montana Wild and you built Montana Wild, but when you were freelance, you were producing assets for other brands and giving these brands like their voice that people really resonated with, right? But you were putting all your effort into building somebody else's brand.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're at now, where it's like, how about we build something for us that we're all super into, that can't be taken from us, and that we can, build the story that people resonate with, and then us be able to continue the legacy of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think was really cool. I think I have a memory that stuck with me when I was thinking about Montana Wild in this conversation is we were actually down at Tortured Challenge in Big Sky. And I was walking by in the hallway and I saw this like really young kid. He's probably like 8 or 9. And he had a Montana Wild hat on.
Really?
And I was just and I think I sent Zack, I think I sent you a text. And I said, I think you're a role model for a lot of these young kids. And I think there's an important part that you have to fulfill with what you're doing. And even I talked to a guy I talked to Slade at Sitka the other day too, and I was talking to him about some stuff, and he was like, yeah, he's like, Montana Wild, I grew up on that shit.
Mm-hmm.
You were at the time you were setting the precedence for a lot of kids that, for hunting, because we talk about the demographic of hunting and the generations of hunters getting older and older and older. And here was Montana Wild bringing in this young, hungry crew of kids, motivating kids to get more involved in hunting, which I think was originally a part of your plan. Even whether or not you spoke about it or not, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, Travis and I didn't grow up hunting and fishing, so when we found it in college, like, we were pretty blown away that we hadn't been exposed to it, and that was just the circumstance of our lives. It was what it was, but we felt like if we could go back and, redo our childhood, like, I wish I would have been hunting and fishing, and so to inspire and just provide a look into what's available for people outside, whether they want to do it super hardcore like we like to do a lot of the times, or whether you just want to go like camping with your buddies at a campsite and like drive your truck and your trailer there. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff to do outside that people should be taking advantage of. And living in Montana, it's like kind of silly not to, I think, even if you're not the most avid outdoorsman. I think most people generally like appreciate time outside.
100%. That's what I think that with you guys, like, coming out of college, just like not a big production, not a big whatever production company or super expensive cameras, is just like low budget, super authentic, like really ambitious and excited. Like, it's just people resonated with it.
Well, I mean, even like, man, I think all these memories are coming back to me, so I'm just gonna keep speaking about it. But
Nice.
like even when we were at Full Draw Film Festival was like just becoming a thing.
Yep.
And we were at I can't remember, like, it wasn't the Rialto, but it was the place across from the Rialto. I can't remember if you remember the facility on Main Street there, but the place was packed, absolutely packed. And there was two really good, I won't say all the names, but there was two pretty prominent people in the room that had produced a film for that festival. And I think they usually chose a winner at the end of it. And I think it was the fly fishing film you did at Rooster's Place at Twin Bridges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think it showed that film, and at the end of it, they did the voting, and the voting back and forth between
Nice.
the two different films. And one was like super high end production film, and the other one was, not saying that your stuff wasn't high production, but like, you know, there's just,
Yeah, yeah.
there was two different calibers of budget probably
Yeah.
inputted into that. And the Montana Wild, just the crowd just went absolutely bonkers
Nice.
for that film. And it was just a really good film because it's like this guy, he was like sitting on the phone. He's a guide, he's an outfitter. He's heard from every single person in the universe about how they double haul and they can, like, you know, do all this stuff. And they're just like excellent fishermen. And Rooster's just like sitting there like,
Nice.
just like nonstop. And then Zach walks in and they're like coming into his fly shop. What's all this Symes shit? You know, just like he's like, and then Rooster's like, man, I gotta go fishing, and he just goes out and just crushes some fish. But I think that was like, you know, like for me, there was like a really big emotion. I think Montana Wild had a big influence on fishing and hunting, whether or not we could collectively find that out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you had more of an influence than maybe you recognize.
Yeah, no, I think after the first probably 3 years of it, like we definitely got a lot more wise to like what it meant to be a content creator and like what our reach was and our influence, especially when people are like sending you like photos and like saying how their kid, like their small children are like watching your films.
Nice.
Like you're like, okay, like, well, we need to make sure like we're not cussing in our films, like we're doing everything like to a T and being thoughtful. Like, you know, as hunters, you're always going to have times where you take bad shots, of like being thoughtful of just all the things that go into like a hunt, filming fishing. And yeah, we definitely have had a pretty good influence on the industry. And I mean, that's been one of my motivations and that's something that I think we wrote kind of in my like mission statement, is to like try to set the standard for at least what my and our opinion of what hunting media should be, you know. And I it's a mix of, I think, aspirational content that just gets you excited to plan a trip with your buddies, and then things that help you be better without, I think, ruining some of the intricacies of like spending the time and doing the things, you know, like just a lot of like gun education, like everyone can shoot their rifles and their weapons better, you know, like there's simple things that you can teach people without like giving away all the secrets, you know, that can irk some people, which in this space, you're always going to piss some people off, because if you're doing good stuff, like people are mad about it and jealous. But yeah, that the shootout video you were talking about that was a cool one, because Rich Hone, who's now over at Squala, he was the marketing director, and we called him, I think, for like 2 or 3 years, because we started making fishing films, and like we'd see what Sims was putting out. And we're like, the shootout was kind of like the video like competition for fishing. We're like, dude, like let us compete, like we'll win. We're gonna win. Like we were pretty cocky. So it was cool that we did win, but we got super fortunate that we got paired up with Rooster, which
Coolest nickname ever, I gotta say.
when we first like came in the room, like we drove from Missoula to Bozeman, and we were at the Sims headquarters, and like everyone's just kind of sitting around waiting for things to get going, and like Rooster's just a big personality, and you love him or you hate him. And like
Nice.
before we got to know him, I think we hated him because he was just kind of an asshole. Like he talks shit. He loves talking shit. He's really good at it.
You have to be as a guide, an outfitter. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
But when you get to know the guy, you understand that like Rooster's heart and motivations for everything he does. Not to say that people don't ever make mistakes, but him as a human being he's a damn good human.
Yeah.
If you have thin skin, like he's probably going to rub you the wrong way.
Well, and that's so that I think what from that statement alone, just about, I mean, it'd be cool even to have Rooster come and do a podcast. And the reason I say that is because I feel like I'm just excited personally, not even, you know, just being on this podcast, but personally, I'm excited to hear from people that you would normally not hear from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like in today's world, and I'm not saying it's overly repetitive, but sometimes it does feel overly repetitive. Like the same personality goes to the next podcast, and the next podcast, and that podcast. So I feel like it'll be nice to hear some refreshing voice from the industry that we maybe haven't heard from before. or maybe they haven't been asked the right questions that they really wanted to speak to. And I feel like, well, it'll be fun to kind of dive into certain topics and things that they've done in their life that it's not always based on hunting, but I think it'll be cool. I'm excited to see and hear from those people that we really know well, and then that we also know really pretty well in the industry too.
For sure. It'll be fun to go back here and kind of talk about some of our past and how we all got here. But first question, I've never asked you this: where did the name Montana Wild come from? Who came up with that?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't think either Travis or I would claim that either of us came up with it, like, individually. We just, like, brainstormed names for a while. And this was, like, way back in the day when, like, Montana Wild, like, the first iteration of it was just a blog.
Nice.
But I was going to school for business and, like, had enough wherewithal to know that, like, okay, like, we should think, like, a little bit more long-term than, like, the first thing that sticks. And, like, we just brainstormed a lot of ideas, and it was like we lived in Montana and we loved the wild, and just for some reason Montana Wild just had, like, a good ring. It just felt very fitting for a wide variety of things. Montana is a pretty, like, both of the terms are very marketable, even though Montana Wild, some people be like, oh, it's like just Montana, but it's like the concept of Montana for a lot of people is like an escape and big sky country and, like,
For
wild
sure.
places. And so I think we got lucky that we picked a good name.
That works out pretty good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But there wasn't, like, we just brainstormed ideas a bunch. Like, I think I wanted to call it, like, Black Wolf Outdoors was, like, one that sticks in my head that was, like, as a kid, you're like, yeah, Black Wolf Outdoors, you know, but, like, and then you're like, no, it's kind of not that cool. Like, that's going to suck after a while. But yeah, Montana Wild just stuck. And then
That's awesome.
it was a blog at first. And
That was in college.
Mhm.
So go back. Where'd you grow up and how'd you end up out here for college?
Grew up in Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Idaho. Grew up skiing. Played some team sports. Played golf. So I'd golf in the summer and then ski in the winter. Missed some college deadlines. Was making some little, like, ski videos with my brother in high school, and then, like, Bozeman had, like, a later, like, application deadline. Great skiing. Had a film program. And I was like, okay.
Nice.
So I went to school in Bozeman, which brought me to Montana. My parents, kind of about the same time or maybe right after that, moved. My brother was still in high school up to Big Fork. So kind of most of the family kind of all shifted to Montana at the same time. And then I did some stuff in Bozeman for a while, in and out of school, tried some different things, and then went to school in Missoula just for business because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I was a pretty, like, opinionated, like, strong personality that I felt like running my own business of some kind, like, felt like something that I could kind of put my finger on as, like, I think I would like to do that, but I don't know what it is.
Nice.
And Travis and I were best friends growing up. And then when I went to school, like, we didn't see each other as much. So it was, like, kind of a cool thing to just, like, go to Missoula. They were the powerhouse at that time. This was kind of like the end of the peak of, like, Grizz, like, Nation was, like, U of M was the shit back then. That was kind of before some of, like, the rape stuff happened, and it got weird in Missoula. And then, like, Bozeman's the spot now. But I went to school in Missoula and didn't have the skiing at my fingertips that I was used to, and just I'd always kind of felt drawn to try hunting as soon as I moved to Montana. It seemed like Montana was like diesel trucks and country music and hunting, like fishing.
Nice.
And I just was like, oh, this seems like what you're supposed to do. I want to try it. And as soon as I did, it was just like kind of over after that. So
Nice.
that was kind of the short of.
And I know through your skiing background too, you were heavily influenced by the style of ski films, and that's maybe what kind of gave you your own voice when you came to the hunting film. Like, once you took that on yourself, you kind of looked at it from a fresher set of eyes than the old school hunting films that, like, through the 80s and 90s, right? Like TV show type of hunt films that I would imagine. I still see that. Like, you kind of have a different mindset when you approach that stuff.
Yeah. So ski and snowboard media was like our inspiration for what content should be. And then when you go to hunting back in probably this was like 2011, I would say, 2010, there wasn't really much online. Like there wasn't YouTube at the time. Like we watched little ski edits on like New Schoolers, which was like a free ski website, and like there were edits and Level 1 and Matchstick and Warren Miller would put out ski films at the end of the year, and like that was what you watched to get hyped. And then you go to hunting and fishing, and it's like TV, and it's all like Ryan was saying, way older demographic.
Oh yeah.
It's all like eating breakfast at the cabin, and then it's like just murder and stuff.
Yeah.
And when we were adult onset hunters, so like we had to learn everything in the whole experience and the process. And I think coming from the ski realm, where like style and creativity and like the mountain and like the views and the like everything that came with being out there was as much part of the experience as just like what trick you could throw down, or like like that was important. It's just like in hunting, like still people want to see you be successful on hunts, and like for the most part kill big stuff. But yeah, that definitely shaped how we viewed content, because there weren't a lot of people that were showing all the other parts of the experience of hunting and encapsulating it into like a film piece. Like it was more just like Michael Waddell and the boys, and they were funny and like having a good time, but they were on a ranch that like you couldn't relate to hunting versus like being out there and like grinding up the mountain and like just all the wild stuff, because there's no map for hunting. Like fishing, like everything was like in the water, like the fish aren't anywhere else. Like skiing, like unless you're a backcountry skier, which is a very small segment, like there's ski runs and a map, and like it's free but it's defined. And then hunting, it's just like you just leave your truck, and if you're lucky, there's a trail that takes you somewhere close to where you need to go. But it's like
you don't know where you need to go
unknown,
either.
so it's like it was really cool, and we just wanted to show and capture some of that, because, like we all know, like the actual success of a hunt isn't always the punching of the tag. Like it's so many other things that go along with it, and so to capture that brought a lot of value to content versus just, well, if we don't kill anything, we don't have anything here, like on to the next thing. So
yeah, that's awesome. And so you guys were producing your own content, and I'm just going to lead how you connected with Ryan. You guys were also doing freelance work for companies as well, or was it more that you were looking for sponsorships? Is that how you guys got connected?
Yeah,
back then.
I think
I can't remember.
It might have been through Mark.
Might have made the connection for us, because Mark was one of our like real early mentors for a period of time. But yeah, we just built content for a couple years while we went to school, and we served tables at Tamarack Brewery in Missoula, and like we just did it for like 2 years just on our own dime.
Awesome.
Like, and then I was going to school at the time and like had an entrepreneurship class, and won my idea for a hunting show, got picked for one of the group projects where we built out a business plan. And so that kind of, I think, helped allow us to think about ways to like monetize our content. And so that's when we started reaching out to brands, because like we were getting free gear pretty early on from companies, but making the jump to like getting paid and trying to figure that all out was like probably where we reached out and like tried to start making connections. And I'm sure Mark hooked us up with you guys because he was working with Mystery Ranch at the time. Like, yeah, I don't remember what the first conversations were, but you were like our point of contact for the whole lifespan of our relationship with Mystery Ranch.
Yep. Yeah. It's hard to remember all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think I think it's like early on, like even before I feel like ambassador programs were even around for most hunting brands.
Mm.
Like I don't really feel like that was even really a thing. I know that in the outdoor realm, because the nice thing about Mystery Ranch is that in the outdoor realm, I got to see what the future was, and then for for just like brand sponsorship and ambassadors and influencers. I got to see where that was going, like in the ski and climbing industry. But it was not really a thing for hunting.
And you just think about when the iPhone was created, and then when Facebook and social media was created, it was like around that.
Dude, I am so old that I remember I was working at a company called Pacific Outdoor Equipment, which turned into Highlight Equipment. We made sleeping mats and panniers for bikes. But I remember sitting in the office with my boss, who was Aaron James at the time, and he was like, "Hey, Ryan, you heard about this Instagram and Facebook thing?" He's like, "Research it and figure it out." Because I was like the marketing guru. But he was like, I'm not sure where he heard from it. Like maybe he heard in the news, or because he was like a big newsy. But he's like, go check it out and figure out what this thing is. And so that was like kind of the kickoff to like social presence.
Yeah.
At the time. So like hunting ambassador programs and the things with Zack, and those were all just like very cutting edge as far as like producing that stuff. So it's and to think about today, it's like, wow, we've come a long way.
For sure. So let's dive into where are you from? How'd you kind of end up in Bozeman, outdoor hunting industry, all that? Just a little backstory for you.
Yeah, I grew up in Minnesota, just south of Minneapolis, in a small farm town. At the time, it was called Apple Valley. But grew up there as lots of sports. Everything was sports based. Lots of football, soccer. I think I played 10 different sports in high school.
Oh my God, dude.
I'm a big sports. I probably lacked on the educational side, but I think it was worth it. But yeah, I grew up in Minnesota, and I got super into climbing with my buddy Kyle.
In high school still?
In high school,
oh, cool.
Yeah. So he was definitely climbing a lot before I was, but I think maybe I started when I was about 16. I started getting into it. We traveled down to Red Wing, Minnesota. Cool boot company. If you ever,
dude, that's what I bought a pair of boots from Red Wing one time with Corey.
Yeah,
Corey and I and my brother, we went on a canoe trip there, and we stopped in there and bought boots from Red Wing. It was cool.
Yeah, is it like the Canyon River? I can't remember. But yeah, spent a lot of time climbing in Red Wing, and another place in Wisconsin. Really cool spot. But yeah, anyway, so I grew up in Minnesota doing all that stuff, and then went to go to school in Colorado for a year, and then I went to school in Chicago. I did a year.
Did you play basketball there? Is that?
Yeah, I played basketball in high school, and I played basketball in college. Actually, like I played basketball almost my entire life. I ended up just wanting to focus on education when I got to college, because I felt like I goofed off with sports enough in high school.
Yeah.
Where I was like, man, I really need to catch up with this educational thing. So for my first 3 years, I didn't play any sports. But then for whatever reason, my fourth year, I played 4 different sports in college.
Nice.
I was like, okay, I took enough break. So I played basketball, I played club volleyball, I played soccer, and I played tennis in college.
Being 6'5" or 6'6" probably helped with some of that pursuit.
Yeah, totally. I think it was interesting because I was like walking onto the basketball team. Like, I spent the summer like relearning basketball essentially. Then I just tried out and I made it. So nice. I did it for my dad, because my dad spent the majority of his life just like driving me around to every single sports. Now that I have kids, I'm like, wow, it's amazing what your parents do for you.
100%.
Like when you're in like your 20s and 30s, like my parents never did anything for me. Never taught me anything about life. Didn't do anything for me. And then you have kids and you're like, wow, they did almost everything.
They didn't pursue any of their own hobbies and dumped it all into us, man.
Dumped it all on you. And that's where I'm at today with 2 kids. But so moved from college. I had my buddy I mentioned, Kyle. He was actually going to MSU in the engineering school. And so once I graduated from the school in Chicago, I literally moved out here the next week. I was just like, what's my next step? And I've always wanted to go be in the mountains somewhere. My parents drove me out to Yellowstone when I was really young. And my mom always tells a story about like we drove out here, and she was like, and I said like, wow, people actually live here. And she's like, yeah, people actually live here. And so I think she's like, at that point, she knew that she was going to lose me at some point to somewhere in the mountains.
Funny.
So it's nice that, I moved here. to Bozeman.
How did Bozeman become the place? Like what?
Well, my buddy Kyle was MSU, and then
Okay,
so I moved
gotcha,
here.
gotcha.
I lived with him. He had a house here somewhere. I lived in a house of like 4 dudes that were still going to college. It's probably like not the best environment, but I got a job. I worked at Bob Ward's.
Nice.
I like obviously
Same here,
like
dude.
like
Wow, did you?
like I
Nice.
worked like I loved the outdoor industry, so I still wanted that to be my focus. So I literally I worked in the ski shop, and I was a floor manager at Bob Ward's.
Nice.
So I'd like I'd go ski in the morning at Bridger Bowl, and then I'd come back, and my shift would be at like from like 2 to 8 or something like that, 2 to 9. So I did that every day for like 3 years.
That's awesome.
And then I was a big climber, so I was traveling down to Utah, going to California, a couple different places just to climb. So I spent a good majority of my life just like living out of my vehicle. Even before like living out of your vehicle was really a thing, I
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
like.
What vehicles did you have at that time?
Oh man, some pretty crappy ones. I think I had a GMC Jimmy.
Nice.
Dude, that's
Those were
great.
sick, though,
Dude.
yeah.
That's a great rig, dude.
Well, back in the day, those were dope.
Yeah.
for like a just
Yeah.
graduated from college. That was a
Yeah.
pretty good vehicle, I
Yeah.
feel like. So I had that, and I ran that thing on the ground. But overall, it definitely served its purpose
Nice.
for like somewhat overland travel to get into these climbing areas, but definitely not super reliable. But yeah, I spent a good amount of time traveling all over the United States for climbing trips and spending an incredible amount of time on that. I think it was a really good time in my life because I really focused on one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got rid of all distractions. Like and climbing is a totally different world where you really have to dedicate a crazy amount of time to be good at your hobby, because you kind of not necessarily like risking your life, but you are risking like injury a majority of the time. So the better you get at climbing, the better you get at doing the activity. I spent an insurmountable amount of time around that concept. So
Did you ever really spend time in the mountains as like growing up in Minnesota, or was it not till like college and later on that you like had that draw?
yeah, well, I mean, I the nice thing is I had a Bible camp I was going to. My mom always brought me to in the summer times. We'd go there for a week, and we wouldn't be there with all our parents. We'd be like camp counselors and stuff. And it was up in the just southwest of Duluth, in the forest and stuff. And so it's like you got kind of that exposure of like just being outdoors and sleeping in a cabin, being with a community of people, playing like cool capture the flag games, and you know, and doing all that fun stuff. And it was on like 3 prominent lakes. So we do like boat stuff. I used to go there with my dad, and we'd catch walleye, in the lake and stuff like that. And we cook it on the fire, and then we bread it, and like, I was just like, wow, this is really good.
Yeah.
But my dad never got really into, my dad had a really bad experience hunting when he first went out. I think he went out with a bunch of 2 friends of his, and they both just got drunk and sat in the truck, and like he got kind of a bad, he was like, so this is hunting? He's like, I don't want to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So he just went back to fishing mostly. So we go up to like Lake Mille Lacs and stuff. It was like a pretty prominent lake in Minnesota, and fish for walleye up there. Yeah.
And then when you came to Bozeman, was it just a group of people that made you get into like the climbing scene, or?
Well, my buddy Kyle, we grew up in Minnesota together climbing.
Okay.
So then he was a big prominent climber here. He was bolting a lot of routes.
Oh,
I don't
no.
know
What
if
would
you know
you
what
climb in Minnesota?
that was in Red Wing.
Okay.
And then there was also a couple different spots that were limestone based.
Okay, gotcha.
But I mean, Bozeman, if you I guess people don't necessarily know the background of Bozeman, but Bozeman has like some of the, a lot of history with climbing, like Conrad Inker, Alex Lowe.
Oh yeah.
Those guys are like legends in the world, obviously, of climbing. I climb with Conrad sometimes when he's around, but the Highlight Canyon is a pretty prominent area for just the lower 48. It's probably like the first ice that comes in the U.S. So there's like, cutting your teeth and learning to climb in Highlight is a pretty nice benefit of living in Bozeman, because people will fly from all over the world or even just the United States to go climb there. So I spent a lot of time there, but I also did a lot of bouldering. So I would go south in California and stuff like that, and go bouldering a ton, but lots of rope climbing. But as far as like, Bozeman goes, like just down the Gallatin River, there's tons of granite old school gear climbing there.
Nice. That's awesome.
Where like you got to know what you're doing. It's not like your classic split or crack at Indian Creek.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's like it was climbing that was very nuanced and trivial and sketchy and not really straightforward. And so you really had to learn how to place gear well. You had to be kind of bold. You had to trust what you were doing
Mhm.
because a lot of things, you know, could rip out or and highlight's even worse for that matter. It's really slippery rock, really skatey rock, and so when you're placing gear up there, it's kind of similar in a fashion. There's a pretty big pucker factor when you're doing that stuff. So I do a lot of mixed climbing up in highlight. So that means you're like climbing on ice. You could be then climbing on rock. So it's like a little bit of a combination. I was actually up this morning climbing some ice climbs, just kind of getting back into it a little bit.
Nice.
So yeah. I mean,
So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. You ended
Yeah.
up at Mystery Ranch.
Yeah.
And you have like a pretty wide array of outdoor activities that you've been super passionate about for a long time.
yeah,
And hunting's like newer to most of them.
yeah.
And I'm curious kind of how you got into hunting, like what, and then you've gone pretty far down the rabbit hole now, I think. And
Yeah, like I mean, I think you guys have figured me out by now. Is like usually when I commit to something, it's usually very, very detailed. So one of my good friends I was climbing with at the time, Dan, he actually lives in Shoto now. He works as a biologist up there. But he was into hunting and he grew up with hunting. He grew up in Billings, kind of between Billings and Hardin. But he was a big hunter and took me out for my first elk hunt in the Crazy Mountains. It was one, I had told him that I wanted to go hunting at some point, and I think it was like the last day of elk rifle season. And he called me like the night before. He's like, "Hey, I'm going out elk hunting in the Crazies. I've got access to this one spot. Do you want to come?" He's like, I think maybe he gave me a little bit more notification like that day because I had to go buy a tag. And so I went and bought a tag.
nice.
He let me know. So I was like putting all my outdoor gear together, like freaking out, like, what do I bring? What do I wear? He's like, just pretend like you're going out to go climbing, but we're going to go shoot something.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I brought my backpack. I brought my like outdoor gear. Like I had, you know, just kind of like your standard outdoor gear stuff, but I knew how to survive in the cold and
Yeah, yeah.
being a climber and all that stuff. So it was really just like a different activity. So yeah, I went out elk hunting that day and I shot a calf cow, like my
Nice.
first day rifle
Nice.
hunting. And I was like, I'm hooked. And a little bit of backstory on that is that, actually my time in Bozeman, I ended up working at the Co-op, which is like a local food store here in Bozeman. And that's actually where from like Mystery Ranch Standard, Mark actually came in and hired me out of the Co-op.
Oh, funny.
He was like, well, I was like, can I have the same pay and the same insurance? He's like, yeah, done deal. But I was working in the bulk food section at the Co-op. And I feel like the really cool thing about that when I was working at the Co-op is like, I never really had this concept of where my food came from. And I always felt like the food I would go buy at the grocery store, like I go to Albertsons and just like, you know, buy whatever. And then that was be my food. But I never really thought about like, where, you know, was this a local farm? Was this like local beef or like, where did this food come from? So when I was working at the Co-op, like they're a big component of like local farms or local ranches that they're purchasing from. So that really became a thing where I was like, wow, well, where else does this stuff come from? You know, like,
Yeah.
I started thinking about the meat, and then I actually was starting to go out and visit some of the ranches and actually buy the meat directly from them. So as opposed to just getting it from the Co-op, I was actually driving out to the ranch to like talk to that rancher and be like, you know,
Nice.
and hear from his story, like where he was getting the meat and how he was doing it. So it became a thing. And then like, so when Dan and I did the whole hunting trip up in the Crazies with him, and I saw the calf cow in front of me, I was like, your food source is like right in front of you.
Nice. That's rad.
And so that's where I got immediately hooked on that whole concept.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
But as far as like getting into hunting, like I obviously had adult onset as well. And I didn't have, you know, Dan was in town for a little bit, but you know, he has his life and everything. So I just started to figure out hunting on my own. Like I just started going to spots and I didn't know like elk distribution maps. I didn't know like where they would where they would bed down on benches at a 15-degree angle because my app was telling me, like I was basically like out there with my, like Garmin. That was a really old device that had like a chip in it. And
Yeah,
I was
have mine right over there on that bench, dude.
I was like uploading like Onyx waypoints on stuff. And like, I was like, okay, if I just like track, I remember when I was like, when you first started hunting, I remember like even this waypoint, I put like elk slip because I saw an elk footprint on this trail and it had slip because it was wet. And I like marked it because I was like, just elk walked here, like, so I felt like that was like the start of like getting really into hunting. And so, fast forward to that, learning about hunting, learning about and doing it on my own, learning how to set up my bow, learning how to set up a rifle, like learning to sight all that stuff in, like really from scratch. This is a while now, but it really became a part of my life and more of a lifestyle thing. And now at this point, it's become pretty much what I do besides climbing.
Nice.
So, and I've definitely appreciated it. I'm still obviously, continuously learning, but I got really into like learning about how to shoot with a traditional bow for a few years, shooting a compound bow and then shooting a rifle. Like I never really got as dialed as you two on shooting a rifle. So I kind of see you two as my mentors from like how shooting a rifle really works.
It was kind of the whole pursuit of all this. It's all, what I love about it is it's all just a journey, and you're just on your journey, and there's not really an end destination with hunting, shooting rifles, bows, fishing, any of that. There is no like end destination where you get to, and that's where I've had a lot of hobbies in my life, and with hunting, it's been the constant because there's no like, there's always something you could push yourself or learn more or try harder or whatever.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of like about it. And like, to your point, I haven't touched a trad bow. Like that's in my future.
It is.
Like that's,
I think it's pretty fun. But I think like learning like in the outdoor realm, like I'm able to take a lot of the stuff that I learned in the outdoor space about backpacking, camping in the snow, camping in different areas, navigating through landscapes. Because even for like as a climber, you'll hike into a pretty remote area and then you got to go ascend a huge, gigantic wall and you have to live on that wall. You've got all your food you're bringing with you, all the activities that you're doing is like on a wall. You're pretty exposed, weather can come in. Yeah. I had a really interesting time on a wall one time where a storm came. We were kind of on this face that was facing east, and we had a whole big thunderstorm come in while we were on like the 6th pitch of this climb, and we had to climb the last 2 pitches in the rain.
Oh man.
And so it's just like things that, so it was nice to be able to live in that realm and then transfer into hunting. And your commitment in climbing in the present moment is really alive. And so it had that same kind of feeling with hunting, like when you're going back to draw your bow or put your sight on, an animal. Like there's can be a lot of anxiety with that, but I felt like my transitioning from like putting my life on the line for a climb and then being in the moment and trying to execute a shot, they're both basically the same thing. So like I had been training. So like when I had to go shoot my first elk, like I wasn't nervous. I wasn't like breathing hard. I was just like calm.
Nice.
So it was nice to, yeah.
What's cool, and it's something I notice about you, and I notice it, I've hunted a lot more with Zach, but like I notice it with both of you is that I see people struggle with when they're out hunting and they're uncomfortable. And I think it's a lot of uncertainty about like what could happen, the weather, or how far we're going to go, are we going to get food or water, whatever it is. And one thing I noticed with both of you, and I would imagine that the climbing makes hunting very easy, that you're just comfortable wherever you are, right? Like you're not stressed out about what the weather's going to do, or like, oh, can we walk this however many miles back to the truck or whatever it is. And that's one thing I appreciate about you, and I appreciate about you as well, Zach, where it's just like, there's never like a big stress because like what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like we're not up on a big wall where a storm's going to come in and it's going to freeze us to the side of the cliff. Like we're going to just walk out of here, right? Like, and but it makes you guys enjoyable to hunt with because there is this lack of stress and you can just be content with where you're at, right? And I enjoy that. And it's like it definitely shows in you and all your outdoor pursuits that's led you now to hunting where you're just comfortable.
Yeah, like climbing is a lot about like how much can you deal with struggle and like keep moving forward. So hunting to me is pretty normal.
Yeah.
Like the whole idea of just hunting is pretty straightforward. I think the hardest part about it in Montana is just like it's like the constant fear in my head is a grizzly bear coming around the corner.
Oh man,
so that's like the one thing that's
bad.
Usually in your mind, well, at least it is for me. Like if you're camping in the backcountry, if you're in a prime grizzly spot, like usually that's the thing in my mind. So when people talk about, I don't mind walking in the dark because I spent a lot of time in the dark, like going to a climb, early in the morning and then doing the climb, or walking back in the dark, like it's never bothered me. And for whatever reason, like as a climber, you weren't really thinking about like grizzly bears as much. You weren't thinking about black bears. But I think when you start becoming a hunter, you're like traversing into areas where like it's off trail. Usually a climb is somewhat on trail or you're getting to a base of a climb. When you start getting this aspect of traversing a lot. Yeah.
That's what the grizzly bear thing. I'll kind of lead this into my backstory a little bit because like being from California, it's very much like Disneyland when you go out in the woods. There are some mountain lions, but there's not much wildlife there. It's a funny situation where they manage it. And so coming to Montana, the grizzly bear thing was overwhelming for me for the first couple of years. I did the grizzly surviving the Grizz course with Tactic the first year I came here because I was like, dude, what are these? Like I don't even know. Like I was just again, growing up in California, I've been hunting my whole life. My dad was a hunter. When there's 4 kids and each of us would turn 8, we'd get to start going with my dad tagging along, and man, he would walk. It's kind of cool looking. It was scary as a kid, but like he'd walk us for hours in the dark, like mountains. Like California has a lot of mountains, and we'd just like hours in the dark, 8 years old, following my dad up mountains. But again, it was like there was no grizzly bears. There wasn't really mountain lions. There is, but not as much as they make it out to be. So it's interesting though. Growing up in California, I hunted my whole life. I've been through a whole bunch of other hobbies. I've get kind of obsessive compulsive about things. And so I have a long list of hobbies that I've really dove into, but hunting's been this constant since I was a little kid. It was deer hunting. And then my brother Justin moved here in 2005. Youth pastor left the church, moved to Luke Murdoch still lives here, saw him today at church. Moved here in 2005. My brother came up to visit him. He was here for like 18 hours and came back home, sold all his stuff that weekend and bought a trailer and moved up here the next weekend.
Was that Jed?
Justin. This was Justin.
Oh, it was Justin.
Jed came up a couple years after that. He came up and lived up here. That's where he met you at Mystery Ranch.
Yeah, Jed and I worked together at Mystery Ranch for many years.
Yeah, I think he was 3-4 years that he was here. He worked with you the whole time there.
And then he left Mystery Ranch and I cried.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Yeah.
He's such a good guy.
For sure. Well, he introduced me to Corey that we've talked about. And yeah. So he's back in California, and that was one thing that, again, with all our hobbies, like when he came back to California, I was still there. We were hunting a lot there as much as we could, but it's just like, it was just different there. The way they run their seasons, there's not very many animals, but I was still like, when we left my dad's kind of oversight and started buying our own binos and backpacks and that stuff, then it was like figuring out on our own. So when eventually we had, got pregnant with Sophie and decided to move to Montana, it was 2015 and we got here. And so then I'm like, I had this foundation of hunting, but it was still kind of like, I was like hunting my dad's spot still.
Yeah.
Right. Like that was like, I'm like, dude, I'm going to do it. This is me now. Like I get it was like, it completely opened my world. And like Montana was always this thing. Like I always wanted to come here. And then when my wife finally agreed to come, I'm like, dude, hunting's going to be my thing. And I'm like, I don't have to like, I don't have to like ride my dad's coattails anymore. Not that that was a bad thing, but it's like I get to pick my own spots on the map, and there's like actual animals here, and there's elk and antelope and bears and all this other stuff I can hunt. And that's what's been since 2015, like full and like shooting, like it's this whole world now that's like just completely encompasses just about all that I do. Because the shooting, my dad tried to teach me to shoot, and he, damn well he meant well, but they just didn't have the information that we have nowadays on how to shoot a gun, how to shoot a bow. I had target panic really bad with a bow, so like that's what is really fun about like you guys. Being a part of like working with you guys is because we are all so passionate, and I don't think we accept just like good enough.
Yeah.
Right. Like we all kind of like, let's get down to the root of like how you do that, and like let's define a process, and that's like what we all do, and that's like I'm an electrician that's what I've done as a career my whole life. But I'd always break stuff down to like, what's the process? And what, like when I make up a plug, it's exactly the same every single time.
Yeah.
When I make up a panel, it's exactly the same. I make up the grounds, I make up the neutrals, I make up the hots, I label. It's the same process every time. Well, I now approach shooting a bow that way, shooting a gun that way, hunting, picking spots, and so that's it's really exciting to see what we're going to be able to do together, because we all have a very similar mindset.
Well, can you step back a little bit and go a little bit more into the shooting realm? Because you told me a story once about kind of your journey with just a rifle. Let's just focus on a rifle for the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that you went down and kind of to this really good story about like what got you into like wanting to learn more. Like you maybe were okay at shooting, but maybe there was there was something that was like itching your brain that was like, maybe this could be done better. So like maybe explain like
and
how
that happened. So
around.
like going back, like started hunting or going with my dad as 8. You start hunting at 12, I think, in California. My dad and uncle bought us all a Mauser 98 and 7x57 Mauser, 7mm Mauser, and he'd cut the stock down so the length of pole would fit us. And they'd taught us shooting before every hunting season. We'd go out and they'd let us shoot about a box of ammo. And like I said, I want to emphasize that my dad and uncle, they very much meant well, but I was sitting at a 45-degree angle off to the side, and there's like, it was just, they did the best we could. And so, but like growing up, so I thought that I was a good shooter. I could hit the whatever gong at 200 yards at the range in California. Well, started hunting, had some misses, had some wounding. My first deer is a story that I'll share at some point, that ran out of ammo and a knife finished the job. It's a long story, but so then come to Montana, and I was like we go on the forums and we read and try and figure out the best thing. So what I decided was the best thing was a Kimber, Montana. The name probably had something to do with my decision making on buying that, because I had this infatuation with Montana. I bought a 270. In California, you had to hunt. We were in a condor zone, so you had to hunt with non-lead bullets. And so what I did, I was loading ammo, and I was running 110 tip TSXs at like 3450, just like way over pressure. And I didn't have a rangefinder. I was like, so the point was I was into this max point blank range thing. So you could just hold on out to like 330 yards, but I have no idea how far 330 yards is. That's pretty far.
Right.
And it could have been 400 or 500. So I had some wounding. So I got to Montana. I killed deer that first year with my Jed came up to visit, killed a deer with that thing. It was like at 100 yards, spine shot it. It was like, just spine shot it at 100 yards. And then, but it was the following year. Killed a buck with my bow. But then I had an elk. What happened? So I actually had an antelope hunt first, and I missed a couple antelope at like between 300 and 400. And I was just like, dude, this is not acceptable, man. Like it started to like wear on me. I was like, I gotta be better than this. And then I went on an elk hunt with my buddy Rob, and this bull is just a nice 5-point bull, and it was like wide open. There was kind of like this canyon-y ravine thing, and we were on opposite side, and there's no trees, wide open. Very little sagebrush even, and I sat there and watched this bull it was at 550 yards. I had a rangefinder by this point. He was at 550 yards, and I never shot my rifle that far, but he stood there for half an hour, and I was like, there was just like no way for me to cut any distance. It was so open, And I remember sitting on this log, and I'm like, God, dude, like I'm stable, but like I just have no idea what my gun is gonna do. I've never shot that far before. So I watched that bull walk out of my life, and it was right there. I was like, dude, this winter I am figuring out how to shoot better, and I'm not. Next year I'm not accepting this. Like,
What year was that?
that was 2017.
Okay.
Yes, 2017 was my second hunting season here, and so that winter, yes, hunting season. I didn't kill an elk, and like I was like, dude, I'm just gonna be, and I'm like, and missing I missed the antelope, and I was just like very disappointed in myself, and then like I was shooting a bow at the same time, and I had target panic like a son of a gun. Like I'll tell you what, like I did the whole like big wind up and came in and hammered that thing, and like it was bad. I couldn't shoot anything good, and it was like, so the bow came a couple years after fixing that problem, but the gun thing I fixed that year, and so I started researching, and I found this community, the Glen Desmarais, and it was used to be called LRC, the range that we shoot at in Three Forks. And I found this long range community, and I went out and I bought a Tikka T3X Lite and 6.5 Creedmoor, and I put a Bushnell LRH 3-12 on it, and I shot 5,000 rounds that year out of that gun.
Yeah.
And I learned there's a lot of myths around guns that when you shoot a box or two of ammo a year, 20 to 40 rounds, and you're like, I think that it's this way, and guys go their whole lives believing this stuff, and then when you start shooting out a barrel or two a year, you realize like this matters, this doesn't matter, like what, and that's where I just keep refining, even in my reloading process. I keep taking stuff out, like this doesn't matter, get rid of it. Like I'm not going to waste time with stuff that doesn't matter. I'm going to focus on what matters, and that's what's been beautiful about that community, the whole long range community, and like you guys are all a part of it now too, where we get to shoot so many rounds. We are blessed with where we're located, with the distance we get to shoot, having a great range, having steel targets to shoot all the time, and obviously with financially couldn't have done this in my 20s because it cost a lot every time you pull the trigger. But yeah, it's been great being a part of that community, and that kind of like took me down a whole nother rabbit hole with competing. I've gone across the country shooting matches and that stuff, but yeah, that's really helped define my approach to hunting, and then I also now have taken that into shooting a bow as well, kind of a similar mindset.
Yeah, and so I think that you also took a road to figure that out professionally too. I think you're started with a few brands to kind of like try to figure out like, is this something that Jared really wants to do for his full time? Because obviously you're a fully licensed electrician and have journeymen that work with you and do that. It's kind of like your day job. Like don't quit your day job.
Yeah,
But as far as like Montana Wild and getting involved in that, it feels like obviously a really natural fit for you to kind of hear it support the guy to your left there with some of this stuff.
For sure.
And it seems like it's obviously your motivation and your passion. So it's you kind of went down a pretty good rabbit hole right now, and then you're kind of trying to figure out the next path for you as far as like how all this stuff that you've taken and learned and shared and running matches and all this other stuff that you're doing, like now you get to apply that to something like Montana Wild. 100%. I'm pretty excited to like see what that is.
What's cool, man, like I don't know what it is about my personality, but it brings me joy. Like it fulfills me to help people.
Yeah. And
especially simplifying the learning curve, because I definitely went down some paths trying to learn this stuff and just wasting time and money. And that's like, I think I'm pretty hyper aware that our time on Earth is short, it's fleeting, right? Like we only have so many hunting seasons, so many summers to spend with our family and that. And like that's, if I can help reduce the learning curve and time and money for people, it makes me feel good.
You reduce the learning time for me shooting a rifle by like 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great, right? Like when you struggle at something on your own and it takes years to figure out, and then when we bring people to the range and like it just clicks right away and they're hitting 1,000 yards and calling the wind correctly, and that it feels good, and you've set them up for success. And not to mention, like as hunters trying to be like diligent with the resource, and like if we can help like share that information more efficiently, where as hunters, like there's just simply not enough animals to support like everybody in the country to hunt. So there's always going to be a reduced number of hunters, and so we rely on the voting public that who are not hunters to help support us and our voting. They'll allow us to keep hunting, and if we help have less of like the FUD mentality out there that gives us a bad look, and more people being very diligent in their approach and being ethical in their like taking of animals, I think that helps all of us. And which, again, I think it benefits us in every way. And like that's what, as Montana Wild, that's where I see us like being able to really make an impact in the community.
Yeah, I think that like that ties back into the things I was saying about just like setting the example, and even at Stone Glacier, like that was a big thing that I pushed kind of on that group of guys there, was to like level up with all of our weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And the funniest thing in shooting rifles, at least, is that there's so many people in the hunting industry that think that the standard of accuracy for hunting is like down here.
Mm-hmm.
That it doesn't need to be ultra precise. It doesn't need to be at PRS levels. It doesn't need to be at this like extremely accurate and precise level to where I know exactly where my bullet's hitting, because it's just an animal. And it's like, I hate that mentality.
Yep.
Like, I don't like wounding animals. Like, what we have available to us as far as hunting is arguably the best in the whole world. So the fact that we get to just do that is a huge blessing. And then the fact that we get to do that, and like, God, you made these animals for us, and like the best way to kill that animal is the fastest, best shot. Like, why would you not want to eliminate the most air out of my system and allow me to have the maximal amount of air when I go out there, you know? And like, I want my rifle to be precise. I want to learn more. I want to like do all these things so that when it comes down to putting all that time and effort and money into hunting, like I can actually achieve success rather than wounding something or missing something. Because it's like, that happens, but those are not fun times and memories when you go out in the field and do that. And it's like a lot of, I mean, if people unfortunately could see what actually happens out there, like there is a lot of terrible marksmanship across the board by hunters, and like, it doesn't have to be that way, you know. Unfortunately, hunting is something that's very ego driven, like a lot of things, but people often push outside of their limits, myself included at times. I think everyone has to. I think it's almost just like growing up, like your parents tell you to do something, but you kind of have to test the limit on your own. Like the same thing applies when you shoot rifles or bows, but there's a lot of misinformation and myths, like Jared was saying, that until you really like dive into the deep end, you don't really recognize as that. And now there's more and more people in the space,
For sure.
educating, and we've only had modern firearms for how many hundreds of years, you know, and it's really in the last 20 that the technology's really advanced past like, hey, I had the money to buy a custom gun, to where factory rifles are really accurate, and people are starting to spend more time shooting guns and getting a large data set and being able to measure things. I mean, just look at what we go to the range with now versus 10 years ago, like the Garmin Chronos and Kestrels and all these things to actually be able to like measure what happens when you send a projectile out of a rifle.
Not just the way that we interface with the rifle as well. That's what's so crazy. In the last 10 years, maybe the PRS has really driven it, where just the way that we get squared up behind the rifle, the way that for 120 years, however long the military's been teaching everybody like that, and the concept of spotting your own shots, and just like all of it, just how your grip and trigger finger and all that stuff, it's pretty wild. And we are blessed with with information out there, but at the same time, I think that we can be a resource that trusted resource, because you can go online and read a lot of really bad information still. People are not afraid to put out information that is not necessarily based in truth, right? Like they might have killed an animal or something, and if you go on the hunting or shooting forums, there's just so much information, and that's what with us, like we've been through that, and we can again just be a trusted resource where people, whatever it is they're coming to us, whether it's a gun, their bow, freeze dried meals, whatever it is, we can provide just valuable information that has been tested and proven to be true.
Well, and I think for you, Jared, like specifically that you've actually taken action on that somewhat, and you've become a trusted resource for a lot of people here, obviously locally. But even I can't remember what it's called. It's like Western Hunt
Expo, Ryan Lampers.
Yeah, is it
or Western Hunting Summit? Sorry.
Yeah, Western Hunting Summit.
Yeah.
I think that was like, this, from like your credibility standpoint, like those guys bringing you on to help kind of run the program. It seemed like that was a cool experience for you, and there was a lot of like new hunters that are coming into it. Because from my perspective too, like I haven't spent nearly as much time as you guys behind a rifle. For me, it was usually like my hunting rifle. I shot it at the range a couple, like 2 weeks out before the hunting season, made sure it was zeroed and shot out to 300 or 400 yards and made sure I was good and felt good. But I never really went beyond that. And I felt like the one thing I learned from one of your local competitions was that it's not necessarily about long range. It's more about just like your positions that you build. And
100%.
That concept to me hit home. I was like, wow, even if it's like a 250 yard shot or 300 yard shot or 450 yard shot, it's just all about setting up your position. So I think the festival, I think that was a good thing for you, because that was kind of maybe not new for you.
That
but
summit was great. Yeah, like up until that point, like I've done a lot of one-on-one trainings for people, but I hadn't done a big group event before. And Ryan asked me to go train for it, and I think his this is just for the rifle summit. He has the archery summits too, but I think his rifle summits, it sounds like before, were less focused on actually shooting a rifle, more on rifle hunting tactics, fitness, and they're like still is a very well-rounded course. And what it kind of turned into was more of it was a pretty high-end shooting course over the course. And we spent Seth McAnally, that runs the belt match up there in Great Falls. He came out with me, and I think we had 35 something. It was overwhelming, but at the same time, we were able to get
35 students.
35 students, yeah. And we ran everybody through fundamentals by dry firing with the trigger cam on, and then we had a monitor. Zach helped set me up with that, and where I was able to actually analyze their fundamentals and like watching the trigger, like where the reticle went when the trigger broke, just dry firing. So we started there, dialed everybody in on their fundamentals, and then we took them to the zero range, and then doped their rifles, and we ended the whole thing with a competition, like a mini NRL hunter competition. And it was super cool because it is seeing the people's progression, like the vast majority of the students, their progression. They brought their own rifles, by the way, and a lot of them, like, just their zeros were extremely far off, because when you actually interface with the rifle correctly with good fundamentals, your zero was never actually correct. So that, it was a really cool experience. And then ran a shooting school for Best of the West this last year, and it was really enlightening, like seeing what information is really relevant to help people like quickly go from where they are to having really good success with the rifle.
You mentioned Best of the West. What's that?
It's a rifle company in Cody, Wyoming. They were one of the early. I'm working for them right now, doing a lot. Brand manager. I'm doing a lot.
It's more focused on like just the rifles and stuff. Like he's talking about like
long range precision hunting custom rifle packages. Essentially, they own Huskama scopes as well.
So you could be like an advisor, like kind of not totally advisor, but actually actively involved in what they're building.
Yep, I'm very actively involved in everything going on down there, and it's been really good. They were one of the early, if not the first, long range hunting companies, but they very much got stagnant in the early or late 2000s, I guess, and so that's what we've been trying to get them. Succeeding in getting them up to speed with, because things have changed quite a bit in the last 5 to 10 years. that what they were doing before was good. It's just there's been so much development with the competition scene from PRS and NRL Hunter, on top of all the other like cool outlaw series and leagues out there. Yeah, we've just learned a lot in the last 5 to 10 years within the precision rifle community. So.
Well, man, that's a cool path. I feel like all the things that you just explained, like going from like being a student of the thing to going out and learning on your own, to then going to the part of now educating people about it, and then going to a brand and helping them with actually like not necessarily gunsmithing, but like gun building and getting down into the weeds of the details. And
For
then
sure.
going out in big, large groups and educating people, and you're running like a local match. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
To see that evolution of that.
I was fortunate. It's a funny thing, like being here, like arriving in Bozeman, like the long range or precision rifle thing was not a plan. But man, we have a pretty thriving community here, and it allowed me to succeed so quickly. Like my learning curve was just extremely steep. And I like Glenn Demeray was my mentor at the time, and man, I shooting 5,000 rounds in a year through a single rifle, reloading, like the amount that I learned in that first year, and then the competition. That's where like there's no better way of recreating having a giant buck or bull out in front of you than going competing, and you're shooting 100 rounds a day or 200 or 250 in a weekend, to be able to like get reps in and practice what you believe like your skill set to be, and actually prove it with a bunch of people watching while you're on the clock. And so the matches in Three Forks went away for a little while, and that's where I jumped in. I just saw an opportunity. I'm good friends with the landowner, and because they gave me the opportunity to learn so much we have such a big community of people that are very interested. That's why I jumped back in 3 years ago and started running those matches out there just to bring them back to our community, because it was I wanted to give back because it did so much for me.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Maybe should we talk about what we're gonna do on some of that on that topic? I feel like it's a perfect opportunity to discuss like maybe even just like a match series for Montana Wild. Like what does that look like? Or
yeah,
you know,
I think there's like decades of things that we can talk about, and I'm like, gosh, we need to do like 10 podcasts to even like scratch the surface. But yeah, we can talk about that, and then I have a couple of questions for you guys at the end. But yeah, I've shot a little bit of the WPR, which are the matches that Jared's a part of, the Western Precision Rifle Series, which is like a PRS style.
Yeah, it's like
match. It's like
local club series
here.
Montana, Wyoming, they're in the Dakotas,
part of the Dakotas.
Now. Yep.
And so I shot a few of those, and did relatively well for being a newer shooter. And
you won Billings, bud.
I did win one match.
You won?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
I don't see the award.
It's up in the
reloading room.
But then I got into NRL Hunter because it was just a better way I felt like to functionally train for hunting scenarios, and a little less. It felt like there's a little less gaming, and like the guns are lighter, so you do, I think, have to be a little more fundamentally sound than shooting like a 6mm 25-pound rifle and getting away with hammering the trigger.
22 GT that weighs 30 pounds.
So I resonated with that. But yeah, the local matches are a really good way for people to just come out for a day. You don't have to have a heavy gun. You could just come out with anything. And there's guys like Jared and Glenn, people that will help you a lot if you're willing to like not have an ego and just try to learn and be a sponge. And so I think as a group, we want to be involved with the matches and like sponsor that. Those are our people, and we're passionate about it. And so I think it's just a really easy fit to be like involved in some capacity, which I think we're all brainstorming what that looks like. But we have a lot of ideas. I think the baby step will be involved with some of the early matches, in January, February, April, or March.
Yeah, I think we'll
something.
have 3. We'll. It looks like we're going to probably sponsor 3 matches at the beginning of the year here. But
sponsor, or are we going to run it? I think
we're running it.
Yeah.
But like it's doing a little more than
things.
we want to do a little more than just like throw our name on it.
But we want to do our style, right? Like
Yeah,
it's more.
Yeah, and I think we'll like got some ideas for some props and like just to make it unique and yeah, and then tied to the matches as well. Then it's like I think a big project that we want to do is like the Shoot Better series.
We've got content ideas, matches that we want to be involved with, matches that I'd like to put on myself for part of the shooting community. I think a big part of like progressing the shooting community is finding ways to bring like actual dollars into like winning these things.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can say that like there's exceptional shooters, like Matt Alwine's one of the best shooters in the nation, and he would be regardless. But like there's a lot of guys that don't shoot like because there's no money in it.
Right.
Like when money is involved, like you get the best shooters in the world shooting rifles.
Yeah.
Because there's a monetary gain associated with being good.
Yeah.
There is a little bit right now. I mean, I'm not going to say that we're going to change the world, but I think the more people that can provide financial compensation, because it's expensive. I mean, just shooting one match, a one-day match is over. It's what, a couple $100 in ammo,
at least. Yeah,
you know. So it's like
plus gas.
or even just getting started. You know, like
Yeah.
I like coming from a point of ground zero. Like I, you know, getting invested in my own setup. I mean, it was intimidating.
Yeah.
To look at what that was going to look like.
Yeah, and that's the equipment out there. And like, don't get me wrong, like the stuff that we use is very expensive, but that's one of my things. Is like the equipment is not what gets you success. It's all what's happening up in here. And so, you know, that's another place. Like we've talked about content wise. Like, let's go get a Ruger American. Those things are shooters. They might not have the greatest user interface, but let's go get a Ruger American and show what you can do with that. And there's like free apps on your phone that you can get. Maybe there's a budget Amazon Chrono that help you just get that data. But there's a lot you can do without having to spend 10 G's on a rifle
don't even
system.
need a chrono.
Yeah, 100%.
Unless you're doing load development, you don't need one.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
But we kind of skipped a little bit of your journey. I think we come back to like your professional work, but can you just give us your progression at Mystery Ranch and like what your role there was? Because like that was essentially kind of been your home until recently, and you spent what, almost a decade there?
13 years. Yeah.
And so I think just giving a quick, since we're just on the topic of our backgrounds, like what was your just development and positions there without like getting into the weeds, because I think that's a whole other conversation on business and strategy and marketing and all the things. But
yeah, for Mystery Ranch, we basically started it from the marketing team from scratch. So it was like a 2-person marketing team when we first kind of started the whole concept. But it was everything. It was, it's branding, which is different than marketing. Most people don't know that those are two different things. But then we spent a lot of time on public relations within the hunting and the military and the outdoor. I oversaw all 4 lines for Mystery Ranch. So I oversaw the military, fire, outdoor, and hunting. So I think it's always funny. People are always like, oh yeah, you oversaw the hunting lines. Like, no, I oversaw everything.
Wow.
So it was quite a lot. I oversaw everything for e-commerce, from growing all of that. I ran a digital marketing team and an e-com team, which kind of coincided with driving website revenue. So I built that basically from scratch, like researched ERPs and different types of languages and different types of programs, different types of integrations, all that stuff. But so e-com and digital became like a big part of my world. I self-taught myself web development. Went to full stack web development school, which is pretty intense, on Ruby on Rails, which is a language, and then taught myself CSS, HTML, and JavaScript and all that stuff, and went pretty deep on that point. And then just became a part of the leadership team at Mystery Ranch for being the director of marketing there, and kind of helped out with. It was kind of unfortunate, but as we went through the process of growing and becoming a strong brand and developing that, like it became a pretty well-known brand within in the spheres that we, if you were part of those industries, you knew who Mystery Ranch was.
Mm-hmm.
It was not really like a mass market thing because we were really focused on specific niches within those markets. And that way, we built a company that people needed the product that we were building. So Mr. Ranch really started out with like special forces groups. Actually, John Barklow was a part of that first group that came to Dana from on the Navy side. And he really helped out with like the development of the first product for procurement from Mr. Ranch. And so we really basically cut our teeth on more special forces teams for Mr. Ranch. So I came in later. They're maybe a few years ahead before I kind of actually landed at Mr. Ranch. But I definitely helped build that team from basically being like a 2-man team. By the time we went through the process of being acquired by Yeti, I was running like a 26-person marketing team that I completely built from scratch.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a long journey. It's I know I just like summarized my entire life in a few sentences there, but that was kind of the background, and we obviously could go deeper on that. But building things from scratch, building things while they were, we're flying the ship, while we're building it. There's lots of mistakes we made, but we also made a lot of good home runs.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were one of the first hunting outdoor brands that were probably doing like drops. Like I know that's pretty common now today, but I think I picked up that idea from a coworker at Mr. Ranch where they were actually doing drops at Nike for new Nike shoes. And I feel like that was like kind of the first time. So we started doing like drops for different style of backpacks with custom components and things like that. So we got to test a lot of different things, but it's amazing being in an industry where being in wildland fire, where guys were using their packs super, super hard. Like we only had 3-year warranties on our wildland fire stuff because that's all usually they'd last because they're in fire all the time. They'd be setting their packs down on hot ash. They'd be burning stuff. Like they'd be sending our packs in all the time to get them fixed. And then being in the outdoor industry and the climbing and the backpacking space, and then being in hunting where it's like backcountry hunting and like carrying out huge loads. And then in the military space where they're just like beating the shit out of everything. Mm-hmm. Like I remember there was one procurement thing that we did for MARSOC where they were flying in a plane and they took one of the packs up at 600 feet filled with bricks.
Oh my God.
On this pack. And they one guy just kicked it out of the airplane and watched it fall down to the ground and it landed on the ground. And the only thing that broke on the backpack was a single buckle.
Wow.
That's dope.
And they were like sold.
Nice.
Cause MARSOC guys, when it comes to like using and abusing their gear, they're probably at the top.
For sure.
As far as like just like daily grind abuse. So it was cool. Like I learned a ton, especially from like just being in meetings with SOCOM during SHOT Show, just listening what their user base needs were, getting the full depth of knowledge, having them visit the ranch on a high frequency. Like we were having procurement officers, coming into the ranch and just talking with us directly about the products. And so we would, they obviously, there would be a bid and we have to build specific things for them. But yeah, like Mr. Ranch was basically like my education. Like out of college, like I learned pretty much how to run a business soup to nuts.
Yeah.
Because Dana allowed that to be a thing. Like he wanted us to be involved. He wanted us to grow as individuals. Renee wanted us to grow too. And then she wanted us to be involved in the process and the decision making. And I got really into finance, which you're getting to experience.
Oh, dude, it's amazing watching you just rattle stuff off that I'm like never heard before.
Ryan's a mastermind of information.
Yeah,
it's hard to explain, but it's like learning all that stuff and learning all those things. I'm glad that I get to kind of support Montana Wild on what that looks like.
Yeah,
be able to take a lot of that knowledge and pass it off to Zach and you, Jared, and then see what we can do with it.
I'm hoping I only learn enough that I need to know and trust that you're smart on the rest of it.
You wonder why the people
will help legitimize a lot of things that I could figure out over a long, like that's like the efficiency thing. Like we can help Ryan get really good at rifles really quick. Like
Yeah.
the business side of all this, we could do, but it's just, it would take so long. And Ryan, I mean, I haven't been beside him for it, but I know that like it's there and you know it and are educated and smart and tactical about so many things that I have just
Yeah.
no clue of. And it changes so quickly too that I'm sure a lot of things that you learned and invested a lot of time in are not useless anymore, but kind of relics in certain ways.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, so from Mystery Ranch, I went into work for a company called Moultrie Mobile. Was a VP of marketing them for about 10 months. It was a good gig, but and then I transferred to another company called Land Trust. Worked for them for a little bit as more of a fractional marketing position. And then now I'm working at Leica in the sport optics as the director of marketing. It's interesting, like going through each iteration of those positions. It's amazing how almost nobody has it really well put together. And I feel like what we built at Mystery Ranch, since we got to build it from scratch, it was probably the most well-designed thing I've ever experienced myself personally. Like, I think the feedback, even from when Yeti was going through that acquisition process, was like, wow, you guys really have your stuff dialed. And I thought, I was pretty proud of that because we invested our life in that. So kind of going through these next iterations of those brands, like I really bring that experience of like, well, this is what it should look like, and this is what should happen. If you do it right, this is what the return that you should see.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool to like kind of work for, large corporations all the way down to Montana Wild, getting back Montana Wild 2.0, like being able to help be a business advisor for this. Say this is where we should go and what we should do, and take steps. It's years, right?
Yeah.
Anything you're going to work on is going to be years.
Yeah.
It's not going to be months. It's not going to be like one event that you do. It's not going to be that one film you create. It's not going to be that one website that you launch. It's just going to be all of it. It's just all of it working in unison over and over and over again over years of time. And yeah, take investment and time, sacrifice and all those things. But I feel like us three are kind of willing to do that. So anyway.
Yeah, I think we have the opportunity to create a lot of really cool things. I'm excited to see what Jared does and is excited about outside of shooting weapons and educating people there. Because, like, it's such an easy, like, that's Jared. But I think I'm interested to see what other it's categories you can, like, really, like, excel in, similar to how you excel with firearms.
We'll talk about a super geek when it comes to equipment. Or I'm not sure if you mean, like, just firearms in general, but when it talks about, like, when I would go out with some friends that were more technical on the outdoor side, like, long-term trips, like maybe they were going up to Denali to do a summit up there. Like they were pretty specific about, this is how much food we're going to take. We're going to vacuum seal this stuff. Like we're going in on sleds. Like we're going to be there for 14 days. Like we're going to set up camp and like the inclination of the mountain. We have to set up, if it avalanches, we have to set up our camp here because the run out zone is here. Like what are all those things? And that reminds me a little bit of where Jared comes from in his mindset. He's like, has like kind of outdoor, not woodsmanship, but actually more like outdoorsmanship, if that's a thing, where it's like you're surviving in weather and conditions and things that are changing. And you can thrive in that environment as opposed to just get completely shut down and then have to leave early. So
yeah, I think Zach and I are pretty similar with like with all that stuff. We both geek out on gear in different ways.
Yeah,
you're more clothing, like clothing better than I do.
Hence the closet over here. I think he's got every piece of Stone Glacier gear.
Well, I worked for
in
him.
doubles.
Well, yeah, but he's got like he likes to stay tuned into the outdoor industry as a whole. Is that like I like to geek out on, like I went on crazy rabbit hole with the Durston gear stuff the past couple of years, and finally got my hands on some of it, and then I've always kind of kept my fingers on the pulse of the ultralight backpacking world.
And and if you guys like Stone Glacier, like go check out like the North Face doing like Future Light, like pretty revolutionary stuff. That's like from a fabric standpoint,
nice.
Like most hunters don't even think about. Anyway,
yeah. No, it's just kind of fun because I think there's all of these just these paths we can go down.
And you're picking up a camera.
Oh, I picked up a camera. That's been super fun. I think
think
it
it's running.
died. I think it died, but
I think it died. Yeah.
yeah, it's been
We lost
super.
it.
That's been this thing. Like I knew that sometime in my future, I thought I'd be older when I finally did, but for whatever reason this year, I was like, dude, I'm picking up a camera, and I've been on multiple hunts with Zack where he's filming, videoing, carrying a rifle, carrying out meat, and I was like, dude, that looks miserable to like be on this hunt and try and keep a camera going, and then after like seeing what he turns out, like the end product, is like, dude, that's pretty sick. I think I want to start carrying a camera. And I told you that I was like, if every hunting season I can get a couple of good images that I want to print and put on the wall, that'd be worth it. But now I'm like full blown obsessed. I'm going down to the park every day with my kids and taking pictures of them. And I've got all these photos. Like, what do? I send them to the grandmas. I send a gallery to the grandmas
Yeah.
every day. But yeah, I'm super excited about that whole journey too.
Yeah. Well, I think you're just in general just like a fanatic, you know. So that's a good thing, and that's like for everything that you're diving into, you're trying to learn it really well, and then translate that into something that you want to have an output from. So
For sure. Yeah, it's been pretty fun. It's artistic. Like I know you guys are both artistic fellows too. Like I'm not a good drawer.
I'm mostly autistic.
Dude,
But,
dude,
artistic.
but you know what I mean though? Like I've always wished I'd be a good drawer, like, or a painter or something like that. And I do not have that skill. My mind does not work that way, but I could be creative and artistic in other ways. And that's what's been fun with the camera and with like creating content or whatever it is for people to inspire or educate or whatever. I think it's a pretty cool outlet for that creative side as well that I'm looking forward to.
yeah, and I'm mostly like more of a photojournalist type person, but I can see things. I'm a visual learner,
Mm-hmm.
so when something's being created, like I can take what Zack has created and then make a trade show booth out of that, and like what that should visually look like, and how somebody, as they're walking through the booth, how they would like experience what we're trying to paint. Maybe I'm more of a creator in that sense.
Yeah.
In that realm, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's super cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
This is for both of you guys, so whoever wants to answer first can answer. But what's the thing you're most excited about in being involved with Montana Wild, and what even made you consider like even going down the road of pursuing what Montana Wild could do and be?
What am I most excited about, and what am I hesitant
And like,
about?
what brought you like into
okay.
like
Gotcha.
being invested enough to even be to this point, which is like the most initial infancy, which you've done a lot of work, and I think we've all done a lot of work to kind of like create a rough vision and path of like, what's the next step? What's the next thing we want to do? But like, it's definitely a big leap of faith.
Well,
like,
so I'll say most excited about it would be creating a brand that we own, that we doesn't get taken from us, doesn't get sold from us, doesn't get, because and that's the goal for a lot of companies. I don't fault them for it. A lot of people, their goal is to build a brand and sell it. That's the goal. But then the people that help build that brand don't necessarily get to be a part of the sell or recoup the benefits. So for me, it's like, and I have no intention of retiring in my life. I enjoy working whatever it is, and that's why I think it's cool if we can create a brand that we can keep and build something and bring people up under us and do what Dana gave you the opportunity to do, to let people learn and grow and be their best self. So that's what's most exciting. And I think what got me on board was just when we went on our mule deer hunt, I was like, dude, you got to get Montana Wild going again, dude. I love those videos. You got to do it. And then and I was like, yeah, you want to film this? Like, we're literally driving to the hunt, and I just had my brand new camera. I was like, you want to film this thing? And like, all of a sudden we're like in the hunt filming it. And then we came out of it. I was like, dude, when are you going to release it? I want to see the video. Because I'm not an editor as of yet.
Have you been editing that?
no, I do have all the footage organized, but I haven't edited anything yet.
Yeah, so I'm just like wanting to see the outcome of it. And then then we went on your elk hunt, and it's like, dude, we're doing Montana Wild. Let's do this.
Yeah. I think for me, it's community.
100%.
I feel like, I went through this transition as a climber, and as I've gotten older, a few other friends would say the same thing, but like climbing is a pretty dangerous sport, and I lost 4 really good friends to
Wow.
climbing over the course of the time here in Bozeman.
That's crazy.
And so there's definitely like this like kind of ticking time bomb on like the activity that you're doing and like how much you're willing to put yourself out there. And then as you just get older, and what's interesting, when I first moved to Bozeman, the climbing community was super tight. Like you knew who everybody was. It was a pretty small gym. Like everyone was pretty technical. Like most people that climbed in the gym were climbing outside. It wasn't really recreational as it is today. It was like pretty hardcore people, and they were doing some bold things. They were traveling all over the world and doing these things. And so over time, like as I spent my time and career in climbing, like my connection to those people became smaller and smaller because we were getting older, we were having kids, people moved away. So the community that I had in the climbing sphere kind of slowly was dwindling with the people that I had kind of originally did it with. And so I went on this pretty long path of, well, what's the next thing? And hunting kind of like climbing was this big thing in my life, and like hunting kind of slid into that void. I met through my friend Blair, who Travis was one of my really good friends. Travis was Blair's husband. He died soloing up on a mountain here in Montana. The whole mountain slid, and he was on it. And so she was actually down in Salt Lake, and I was just like looking for something different. I was just like, I want to find a community that like likes to get together, work out, just do something more functional. Like I wanted to keep my body in good shape, but I was kind of jaded on climbing at that point. And so I went down there and did the symposium of Mark Twight at his nonprofit studio, and went there for the weekend and got to listen to him talk about just like his life and as a climber, and then also all this different type of workouts that he was doing there. And so when I came back to Bozeman, I was like, okay, well, that community's down there, so I'm not gonna be able to like go down there. So then I randomly got introduced when I was my last few months at Mystery Ranch. Weston Paul, was it, what do you call it? Like Promont Outdoors.
Yeah.
Like I remember that was like a cool little thing. It was kind of like associated with what you're doing,
we
but
ended up buying all of his designs when he kind of decided to stop pursuing.
Yeah, so maybe we need to bring Weston in to have a
Yeah.
podcast, because I think that would, because
Weston's
Weston's great. And so
100%.
it's like Weston invited me to Mountain Tough for a little bit, and I was like, as a climber, I was like, you get these like, at least for me, I get these mindsets about like, well, Mountain Tough is not really what I need. I'm a climber. I can do all that stuff. But then when I actually got into it, I slowly learned that like I have no leg muscle, none. I could lift a lot of things, but like when it came to like doing like 200 lunges in a row, like
Dude, you had grip
throw
strength
that out
for
the door.
days. You blew me away on the grip strength stuff, dude.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. Like most people were like doing, I think like 60 or 70 pounds, and I think I was like holding like 100 or 120. But that's just because it's this climbing strength. But like going through that and getting to be involved in Mountain Tough and being involved with them and working on their gym, and then just doing some of their gym dailies and being, getting to know Dustin a lot better. Obviously knowing Weston, it just became more of a community thing for me, really. I was like, wow, I found something to fill that void and be a part of something. So Montana Wild for me is like, is even building on that community. Like, what can I take from the Mountain Tough stuff? What can I take from the Mystery Ranch culture and community that it had there? And then what can I do with Montana Wild to kind of build this culture that I feel like is begging for somebody to step into this void? Because I don't know if anybody has been watching the news lately, but a lot of companies in Bozeman have gotten sold recently. And they've been sold to big corporations. I'm not saying that their culture is going to disappear, but a lot of that stuff will fall away. And a lot of stuff is happening to Mystery Ranch right now, getting stripped apart. For parts. So you'll start to see that. So I think Montana Wild has this like really cool opportunity to kind of come in and fill that void. And maybe it's in media and maybe it's in products. I don't know. But yeah, it seems like a cool thing.
Nice.
For sure.
Hopefully that answers your question.
It did. What made you even want to consider working with myself. I mean, Jared's a lot easier to work with than me.
Well, I think what I've always appreciated about you is that you've always been, brutally honest, at least with me. And I think that you also have drive. It's hard to it's kind of hard to explain, but there's people that come to work and do their job and then go home. And then there's people who have a reason as to why they're there. And I feel like in an industry where there is a lot of product whores, a lot.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that when they get paid, they'll talk about something. And, but there's also a few people in the industry, feel like Aaron Snyder is one of those people, he will talk about any brand no matter what brand he's associated with. Yeah. And I feel like in the same realm, Montana Wild has that same kind of unique opportunity where we can talk about certain things and be open about it and talk about things that we like, even though it may not be a person that's directly sponsoring Montana Wild. But as far as you and specifically Montana Wild, I've always trusted you. You've always been on time. You've always delivered 100% of what you said, which is also uncommon. A lot of people talk about what they're going to do. And when you manage a 26-person ambassador program, which I built from scratch at Mystery Ranch, not saying that people didn't deliver, but some people didn't. And they would say that they would do things, and then we had to end those contracts because they didn't do those things. Yeah. So, yeah, I feel pretty stoked just about the opportunity, about the idea, where it can go and what we can do with it. But yeah, I'm pretty excited all around just about Montana Wild in general. So
nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys are here because it's more fun to build things with friends, even though running a business with your friends is always a challenge. It's cooler to do stuff as a community, I guess a small one here, but hopefully a large outreach of community versus just always being the lone wolf. Even though I feel like kind of the concept of what we're doing is a little bit of the lone wolf in the industry because we've all worked places that grew to a scale that didn't maybe prioritize the original culture that provided the value to the business. But it'll be cool. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good point, and I feel like we can build a culture of people or individuals. We can make an impact in more places than just Montana. We can get on different podcasts in different places and help kind of share the voice of what we got going on. But there's a lot of ideas I think that we haven't even talked about yet, obviously on this podcast, and it's probably good not to always talk about everything that you're doing.
Oh yeah.
But there's definitely a good opportunity for what we've talked about and what our vision is for some stuff. And so I'm excited about just kind of getting involved in that and seeing where it goes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
Yeah, it was an hour 50, went a little longer than we anticipated, but it was a good conversation. I don't think we went, we got dull there at all.
We didn't even get into the weeds on a lot of the things. But
this is a good intro conversation, right? Like
For
this,
sure,
this what our goal was to kind of give, some listeners and starting a new podcast and starting a new, Montana Wild 2.0 and all the things that we want to achieve and do as a group. And, we'll have, I think the thing that we'll go through some good times and some tough times with Montana Wild, but I feel like with you guys, we can be honest with each other, and there'll be things that we agree on. There'll be things that we don't agree on. But we're open to having those conversations. I think that's one of the cool things that we had at Mystery Ranch is that we would give each other a really hard time and you'd have some thick skin and people would call you out on stuff that wasn't working and you would be okay with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like that same culture is what we want to build here is that we need to be open and work together and be open and challenge each other. And especially when we're wrong or even when we're right, encourage that and build people and build, a company that's really has that in mind. So,
I think the podcast will be a cool way to kind of go behind the veil a little bit and talk about those things. I mean, we're at a stage where don't really want to overpromise anything because there's so much.
There is.
And we could come up with ideas for 10 years, if we wanted to right now. But I think once things hit a rhythm and we have a more established kind of model for what Montana Wild is. It'll be cool to like, I want to bring people inside and educate them even on how teams work, how products get developed, how content gets developed, the things that worked, the things that didn't.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
For sure.
And even
the
like
internal arguments that we should have, because if we're passionate about things, we should disagree at some point on what we think the right path is or what the right decision is, and like hopefully be able to communicate in a way that like found whatever the truth or the right decision should have been, even if sometimes you have to be like, I was wrong. Because I think that's like the human element needs to be a part of it, right? Like,
yeah, or and
podcast is just boring if you just ask the same generic questions of how you kill freaking a deer. Like, yeah, we love killing deer, but like you can only listen to so many of those podcasts. You know, everyone in life has to like have relationship and work and overcome things. And I think just trying to like bring that into what we have here, which will definitely come out in a lot of the conversations we have, but it'll be cool.
Yeah, and it's also just like, you know, creating good hunting films that get people psyched to go do the things, because that's what Montana Wild originally, like for me, like whenever I'd watch a film, like usually the next day I'd be at the bow shop shooting my bow because that film got me psyched to like, okay, like I got to get back in and spend time on that, you know.
You're e-scouting for next tag that you're going to try and find or whatever it is.
Yeah, you're like, why am I doom scrolling and why am I watching this like Netflix series that doesn't mean anything?
Yeah.
Like let's get back to like the things that mean the most. So.
100%.
Even like getting ready for this podcast, I cleaned out as organized as my garage is, and you guys have seen it.
It's
way
like
cleaner, way cleaner than this garage, but
dude, yours is at this end. Mine's at this end. Zach's is right in the middle.
We're gonna do a cribs here because we had the original Montana Wild cribs. I think this house is pretty crib worthy to show people. But my next garage will be a little more dialed than this one.
Well, it'll be 2.0, you know. So like usually,
it'll be like
1.0 is usually you never, you know, in the outdoor industry, you never buy the first version of a product, you know, because it's usually got a lot of kinks in it. And you wait for 2.0 to come out the following season because that's usually got all the kinks worked out.
Yeah.
Because they had to push the product to market, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bozeman's an expensive place to live. I don't think any of us have enough space for what we would prefer to have for all of our gear.
Oh my gosh.
10,000 square foot
gear.
shop on add on to my house, to my 1,500 square foot house.
Jared especially.
Yes.
Oh my God, dude. I've got a lot of tools. That's the thing. We've all got a lot of gear. I've got a pile of tools in mine too that takes up a lot of space, man. It's bad.
Yeah.
I'm borrowing some of those tools right now.
Well, cool, Jared. You want to wrap us up?
Yeah, it was great. It was a great podcast just to kind of go through and get all of our histories. It helped me get to know you guys a little bit better too. I've known you both for a while, but it's kind of cool to hear the back history of Montana Wild, kind of where it started and then where we're going. So I'm excited. We'll keep these things rolling.
Heck yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, bud.